Feet wearing black boots walked on the road. On this road you could see electric poles. There were crows sitting. On the ground there was a trash can filled with rocks. The blonde man was leading and followed by 2 policemen. Blonde hair asked, "This is the street where the gas explosion occurred?" "Right." The blonde man used a scarf to cover his nose and said, "Well, not to mention the horrifying ruins here. Even the houses intact, dilapidated and dirty." The blonde-haired person was the senior police officer of the 3rd Regiment. Thunder Ryan. Ryan took out his cigarette, lit a cigarette and asked, "By the way, how long will this modification last?" "How long?" A person behind replied, "About half a month ago Noken Daily reported on this situation. But due to many reasons the construction continued to be delayed until Roll Resources signed a construction contract. Rebuild this street. Then the construction work will finally start again." Ryan asked again, "Half a month?" He smiled. "What happened half a month ago has continued until now. Is it still this pathetic? The working productivity in the upper-class city is just like this." A young policeman in the back said, "These aristocrats from the Central District don't know that the project construction has been delayed many times to meet the lack of entertainment news in the Central District over the past month." The old police officer next to him said, "There is no other way than the dark police department. Initially, the high-ranking people always had to serve the powerful and the nobles from the center. Since then they have always ignored and disregarded the poor. Bear with it if you really offend the leader. It will be difficult for you to live later. You don't even know if you can keep this uniform or not." Ryan put his hands in his pockets and walked away saying, "Let's go. There are only remaining stores next door that need to be checked. On this road. Right, if it keeps like that. This job will become a lot easier." At this moment Ryan's foot stepped on something black. He raised his foot. The black thing could still last long. He said, "Oh my God. This place is really dirty and dirty." At this moment the old policeman behind him quickly ran up and said, "Oh my God. Sergeant, please don't move and just stay where you are and we'll clean it up." Ryan didn't care and stood still. He thought about big-breasted girls wearing bikinis and bunny cosplay and everything, thinking, "That's so devilish. 12 hours ago I was still talking to Bob about which club to go to tonight to find entertainment. Which ball to go to next week to hunt for succulent girls. But in the blink of an eye I was excited. Ran to this weird and wet place to work. And as far as I know, this incident can't be solved by relying on the police." Ryan was very angry. "Standing still for the police. What I have to do is represent the central government's attitude to reassure those who are unlucky. Or in other words, I just need to play a small role like in a movie set and that's it. Work." Ryan was very annoyed and gritted his teeth thinking, doing these useless, ineffective things is so boring. Ryan's yellow pupils behind his glasses flashed. "Oh my God, this place, this damn monster is as bad as old Bob's black coffee. I can't even breathe." He was very annoyed and touched his head. "I swear if I get promoted to level 1 police station I will never run around like a hyperactive collie again." Some dog was running and shaking its tail behind him. Ryan thought, because of Noken's existence, "I have to quickly finish my work and go home. Let's get a good night's sleep." The 3 of them walked past the place where the trash was piled up and asked a fat man. Then comforted the remaining residents so they could wave goodbye to them. The old policeman behind them said, "My God, I have never had a job so easy. Did you see the respect and fear in those people's eyes?" The young policeman next to him replied, It's all thanks to Mr. Ryan. Otherwise those people would have been investigated by the Central District and no matter what problem would arise. They hate it, because with just one question they can't immediately say everything. Everything." Ryan held the file in front and remained silent. Then asked, "There are only 2 more stores left and this street has all been inspected. Charlie, quickly go in there and tell the owner of this store to get out." Charlie replied, "Yes." Quote, Charlie raised his hand to knock on the door. Charlie said, "Open the door. The Central Police Department is here to work." At this time the fat neighbor Colin quickly opened the door and his big belly hit Charlie's face. Fat belly neighbor Colin shouted, "Oh, Sergeant. Hurry up and save me. I can't stand it anymore." Charlie was startled with a shit sound. Colin hugged Charlie tightly until he cried and said, "Please save me. I've been tormented to this point. If this continues, I'm afraid I'll die of thinness." Charlie quickly shouted, "Calm down, let go. If there's anything, stand up first and then talk." While Ryan and Black Hair were in the back silently watching Colin hug Charlie's leg and beg, Colin said, "The words I'm about to say. You absolutely must not panic." Colin said, "The owner of that bookstore is a devil." The three people who were wary listened. Everyone was bewildered. The cigarette in Ryan's mouth almost fell out. Charlie couldn't believe Colin hugged his legs tightly and said, "I suspect the man in there has possessed by something evil. He can pass through walls and can control all sorts of terrible things with his will." Colin tremblingly recounted, during the early morning of the previous day. Colin imagined Lin Ji holding two monster chainsaws. Colin recounted, "I heard the sound of him using a chainsaw to cut bones and meat. Very could be human. That sound was very loud and scary." Colin looked at the three policemen recounting the horrifying incident that never happened. He even laughed so fiercely I felt like he could kill at any moment. The three policemen stood there in a daze. One could say they stood dumbfounded. Colin continued, "Do you guys understand? He's really the devil who kills people. Makes people live, don't they? If I die, maybe one day I will." But when Colin was about to continue, he looked at Ryan and the three of them. And the three of them were silent and said nothing. Charlie even laughed out loud. Charlie quickly pulled his hat down and said, "It's nothing. I just remembered something funny. If the situation is as serious as you say, I advise you to go see the priest at church and let him solve your problem." Colin shouted, "I'm already looking. The priest is on his way here. He'll be here very soon. I'll say it again, I'm really not joking. He's serious." Black-haired man from the side quickly said, "Who, mister? You seem to be a bit extreme. Do you want to calm down a bit first?" Ryan's eyes behind the glasses flashed with annoyance. "If you keep saying that, do you have any evidence to prove it?" Colin opened his mouth and shouted loudly with saliva flying, "How can I have evidence of the devil?" Colin shouted, "That's the devil. That's the devil. Do you understand? In the movie, as I said, you absolutely must not look directly at its body. Otherwise you will have bad luck. I'm still young and still want to live a few more years. I don't want to die so early." The other three people I held back my laughter, but Charlie laughed out loud, which always made Colin petrified. Colin shouted, pointing at Charlie, and said, "What are you laughing at? Is this supposed to be so funny? You've been there laughing all this time." "Me? Are you thinking that I'm crazy so I'm talking in my sleep?" Charlie quickly lowered his voice to defend himself. "I don't have you, mister. It seems you only now understand my situation." Colin shouted in disbelief. "What do you mean? If you don't believe what I say, you'll regret it. He's really a devil." Ryan silently listened to the two people in the hallway. Charlie continued, "Hey, if you keep talking like that, we really suspect there's something wrong with your head." At this point, Ryan couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped up and patted Colin's shoulder, pushed his hat in a cool way and said, "Okay, then you just stand there and wait until your priest comes to help you. We're not done yet. Push the issue here." Colin was forced into the house by Charlie 1. Colin shouted, "Don't go. Believe me, he's really dangerous. Please bring someone in there. The door is broken." Charlie accidentally slammed it closed. The door was closed tightly. The two policemen laughed. Haha couldn't stop laughing but hugged his stomach and knelt on the ground laughing. Ryan over here threw away his cigarette saying, "Is this the quality of people in high-class cities? Let's go. There's only one last store left." The two policemen quickly smiled and replied, "Yes, Sergeant." They arrived at Lin Ji's bookstore. They didn't notice there was an eye staring up in the sky them. Ryan looked at the bookstore with his hands on his hips and said, "No matter how you look at it, this is just a normal bookstore." Ryan pursed his lips and thought, "But I wonder if it was due to the influence of that speech disorder guy from before or not." No. At this moment there seemed to be an indescribable gravity emanating from that old, run-down store. Ryan reached out and grabbed the door handle and opened the door. The two people in the store, Lin Ji and Moon, looked at each other. Ryan's eyes flashed behind the glass and asked, "Supreme Police Department works. I wonder if you've come across anyone suspicious recently." Ryan took a quick look at the layout of the bookstore and thought, this store's layout is still very new. It must have been recently renovated. Ryan looked at the monster statue on the table, also uses demon stone to fly away evil magic. Doesn't look like anything unusual. Ryan looked at the girl again, but this girl's information is not listed in the basic registration information. Is she a new salesperson? Right. His whole body is covered in bandages. It looks like he was injured not long ago. At this time Lin Ji spoke, "Sir. Hello. He is the owner of this bookstore. If you have any problems, please ask directly. I know everything I tell you. Ryan said frankly, according to this store registration information document. There is only one person who is the store owner. Lin Ji replied with a smile. She is. I just hired a salesperson recently. Oh my gosh. Business has been quite busy lately. I can't handle it all by myself. Ryan heard that and said, is that so? Then show me her identification or ID card. We need to register a bit. The two Lin Ji heard it as if she saw a shadow covering her. Lin Ji put her hand on Moon's shoulder and explained to Ryan, what this is a bit troublesome. This girl is the daughter of my friend's distant relative who just moved here from the central district. I think you should know the procedure to change from a noble to a commoner. It's actually a bit complicated. Lin Ji put his hands on the table right next to the pot. A certain wilted rose revealed a watchful eye. Ryan heard that and said, oh, I heard about this. But what are the injuries on her body? Lin Ji, the talented screenwriter, immediately made up a story. That's the reason why his family went downhill, leading to the current situation. The questioning Moon couldn't catch the signal of Lin Ji's lie. Moon, who doesn't know how to lie, started sweating and said, he's right. I'm injured. It hurts. I'm miserable. Lin Ji felt like he was petrified after hearing this. Then Lin Ji coughed and coughed to hide his embarrassment. Still, let me talk. This is a long story. The wilted rose emitted a black aura that enveloped the three people. Ryan now approached the folding chair and put his hands on the chair and said, come again. Said that the fat neighbor next door to your house seems to have a little prejudice against you. He keeps saying that you are the devil. At this moment Ryan saw the blood on the chair and was startled. Lin Ji, the deep voices asked back. The devil really speaks nonsense. Lin Ji said, I really didn't think that Colin would actually have such views about me. At this moment the wilted rose emitted a strange aura. The moon stood to one side and his whole body trembled. Ryan was also startled. Ryan looked over and only saw two policemen following behind as if he had been attacked by something and screamed. But couldn't escape the sound. Ryan quickly looked towards that rose tree. That flower tree peeked out an eye in the center surrounded by countless big mouths. Lin Ji was still explaining. But his explanation in other people's ears sounded like a devil. Lin Ji spoke up, just a little brainstorming to know, how can I be a devil? The three policemen Charlie saw the mouth too. Lin Ji spoke. His eyes closed and said, as you see, Sergeant. Lin Ji smiled, clasped his hands and rubbed his thumbs. Sitting there very normally, but in the eyes of the crowd there was like a ghost behind Lin Ji. There was also a strange black and red aura. He spoke, I am a living person. Colin went into the room to check carefully. He sprinkled the wine down according to the priest's words. Colin whispered and repeated, thank the moonlight for giving this weak and cowardly child pity and peace. Colin let out a sigh, feeling much better. Formula Priest Vincent's holy water is really effective. As soon as I sprinkled a little, I felt a lot less stressed and anxious. Finally, I can sleep well tonight. Colin recalled the success. The medicine mix formula sighed and thought, the only downside is that it's a bit expensive. But Colin stood up and shouted, expensive is expensive as long as it can make you feel comfortable, then it's all worth it. Colin, walking near the window, said, those idiots don't know what the time is like. Right, if you don't listen to me and take my word for it. Say I'm crazy, I'll give you a taste of how dangerous it is. Colin lifted the window rim to take a look and saw three policemen. One with his hands on his hips. The other crossed in two. His hand raised his hand to push his hat. Extremely cool, like the superhero trio, he thought. Those three guys with only two contemptuous words in their eyes now deserve to be punished. But what if that police officer from the central police station can really use his cocky aura to exterminate that devil? So, then it's okay for me to be a crazy person just once. Colin clutched the pillow around his neck. They have guns, but we can't rule out the possibility that they will die. Right, Colin thought. Let's kill that evil guy. Make sure it won't hurt us. Scared too. Still on this side, Ryan's eyes were wide open. Lin Ji smiled and said, just a little brainstorming and you can figure out how I can be a devil, right? But you see, policeman. Ryan clearly saw Lin Ji's lips moving loudly and speaking, I am a living person. Ryan was a little scared and still dared to be confident at first, shouting, you. Lin Ji's voice was still speaking. Mirror, his face flickered like a broken TV. Then the three people saw the silhouette of Lin Ji with the moon and two decorations. Flowers and statues in the distance. Then officially turned it off. Now only darkness remains. 3 policemen stood in the dark silently saying nothing. Not daring to say anything. 3 people like 3 statues standing still in the dark. A red light flashed from above their heads. Falling a drop of water red, then an eye flashed. The red eye followed by countless red eyes along with a red mouth were at Ryan's feet, making Ryan scared. Ryan cried with tears in his eyes screaming, "What do you have in common with a human being? This is not the appearance a human being should have." Ryan had countless tentacles pierce his whole body and the eyes like chewing gum being stretched into countless shapes. Images from the past appeared. Ryan asked himself, what is this feeling? All 3 of us are like giving birth to brief hallucinations and intermingling with each other. Horror, fear, despair, blur, hysterical shock, all intertwined and in harmony together. Blood dripping, his hand hanging down next to Ryan. Ryan's shirt was taken off and lying with his arms spread out, he was scared and thinking, this is broken, everything can't work anymore. How long will it take for me to be completely destroyed? Ryan's whole body was like a piece of flour that someone squeezed and blurred. His whole body seemed to dissolve in water. He felt like he was falling into despair. Hopeless. Extremely, the feeling that comes from the mind that is beyond humans' inherent sensory perception is really very strange. It can be felt as if something is gnawing at the whole body. Ryan's whole body seemed to be bitten by a monster. Little by little, Ryan thought, the ball club, all desires and desires also began to disappear, followed by military rank, family, and even nurturing desires, descendants later. Everything turned black then cracked. Ryan's voice shouted, "What are you guys doing?" A flashing red eye was staring at Ryan. Now there was nothing left but a skeleton. The red eye flashed in the gap and then disappeared from the gap. The 3 policemen seemed to be summoned back to the bookstore. Ryan cried, who groaned twice, "Ah!" Ryan was scared, his glasses fell to the ground. He thought, I'm still alive. What just happened was not hallucination. The 3 of us were almost swallowed by that strange flower. A certain rose was staring. At this moment something lit up in Ryan's chest. He looked down and saw only the talisman worn around the neck emitting red light. Ryan silently thought back to her words, "Little Ryan, you have to remember what Grandma said. This is an exorcism necklace passed down from our family. You have to remember to wear it on everyone everywhere. The divine blessing written on it will help you resist the invasion of evil spirits." The talisman on Ryan's neck gradually caught fire. His eyes widened with blood. "Oh my God, thank you, and what that damn video store owner said is true. No, this person is 100,000 times scarier than the devil. Just a flower that he raises can eat people." Ryan was extremely scared, as if he was standing in the dark being eaten by countless monsters. "I felt like a part of myself had been eaten by it, but I couldn't tell which part was left. I just vaguely feel like something very serious will happen in my future life." At this time there was the sound of kneeling on the ground. Ryan glanced slightly only to see the 2 policemen seemingly suffering. The pain is endless. They scream, "No, save me." At this moment the door was opened. A person wearing a cloak walked in. A pair of black eyes flashed. At 01 minute 11 seconds the other person easily knocked down the 2 policemen. The 2 policemen were groaning. At 02 minutes 45 seconds the other 2 policemen were beaten to death by the person who had just arrived. At 03 minutes 14 seconds the 2 policemen were being dragged away by the other person. Ryan saw this with a bewildered face and thought to himself, this move, or decisively maybe this is the person who interrupted that flower's cannibalistic progress. Ryan smiled thinking, oh, what is this feeling of being carefree and carefree? I feel like I've seen this face and sparkling eyes somewhere. It turns out Ryan was sitting there watching cartoons as a child and asked, who are those people? Are they birds or planes? Position. No, that's our hero Noken. At that time little Ryan watched Superman on TV. Superman on TV at that time saved a girl and said, don't worry Martha, I'm here. You have nothing to fear. Scared. The girl said, thank God Rome, I can meet you like this. I immediately feel at peace. In little Ryan's eyes the silhouettes of the other 2 reflected each other. The man said, Cook. Honey, I told you, all you have to do is open your mouth to ask for help and I will definitely come to save you. The girl said, I believe that because you are my hero and my savior. Man said, dear Martha, this place is quite safe. Please promise me that you will be here and wait for me. I will go defeat that demon king. And save everyone and then return to you. Okay, the girl said. Replied, I promise you. You try to endure a little longer. Leave the rest to me. The 2 policemen placed against the wall. Ryan thought, it's not wrong. It's the feeling he has on his body. That year, it's like the main character plays the role of someone who deliberately appears at the last moments in dramas and movies. And saves everyone. At this moment, suddenly Ryan was startled and realized, wait. This young man looks familiar. Yes, he is a young level 1 inspector who was promoted in recent years. The grey-haired man turned his head and glanced at Ryan. The man with grey hair who is unknown to anyone is Ryan. Ryan was also startled and looked at Claude. Yes, I remember, his name is Claude. Tears flowed from Ryan's eyes. So good. I'm saved. He said that our inspector was a pure civilian. The person who was promoted from nothing was completely based on his ability and not thanks to anyone's promotion. Coincidentally, he was the person in power in the Central District. Tam is planning to retake the upper-class city to spread the news. This young inspector appearing here is definitely to save me. With my family's power, I just need to take this opportunity to set up a plan to save me. Establish a relationship with this young inspector. Then Ryan looked at Claude and asked, Sir, Inspector, I am. Who expected Claude to wave his shirt and walk past Ryan? Ryan was bewildered. Huh? Claude's face was solemn as he walked towards Lin Ji. Claude glanced at Ryan and sighed. Claude stood in front of Lin Ji and spoke, Hello Sir Lin. Claude placed one hand in front of his chest and one hand behind his back in front of the light. Ryan's bewildered eyes bowed his head and said, I'm Harry Claude, currently holding the position of Senior Inspector in the Central District and also a student of Master Joseph. I'm here on behalf of Master Joseph to send my regards. Ryan finished listening. His head hit the ground hard. The police department hat on his head also fell on his whole body. He foamed at the mouth and passed out. Lin Ji hesitated a bit and pointed to the fainting policemen behind him and asked, Hello. Hello, are they okay? In Lin Ji's eyes at that time, Claude had just arrived and didn't know what Claude was saying. But the people from the police station were scared and fainted. Lin Ji thought, how did they hit the emergency room? How can you be so scared? You're so young yet you're already so stupid. Lin Ji hesitantly asked, This isn't because you're too scared, is it? Claude felt like he wanted to fly away after hearing that. I thought to myself, how is it that you don't even understand yourself compared to the Eastern and Western old man? Is this something all big men have in common? Claude thought to himself, fortunately I'm used to dealing with my teachers. So in this type of case I just do what they want. Claude replied to Lin Ji saying, no big problem. Love, their condition is just due to overwork, that's why they just need to rest for a few months and it'll be fine, just in time for them to take time off. You don't need to worry too much about their physical and mental health. Claude spoke up, no problem. Their condition is just due to overwork, that's why it's like this. They just need to rest for a few months and it'll be fine. Just in time for them to take time off. Lin Ji heard that and smiled with relief, thinking, if their superiors say so then there really is no problem. Claude also half smiled and narrowed his eyes and said, yes, don't worry too much about your physical and mental health, surname. Claude said so on the outside, but in his heart he thought, it's strange that there's no problem. Claude thought about the moment he walked into the bookstore and saw 3 policemen. Each one pale and unconscious. Thinking, the problem of these 3 guys is really serious. Let alone resting for a few months. Maybe they won't be able to have a normal mind all their lives. From now on they can be tormented by this fear in their hearts, reducing most of their desires to the point of non-existence. Thinking of the 3 pale-faced children, he thought, it's because I interrupted in time. If I had come a little later, these 3 soulless corpses would be lying here right now. Claude went to the girl Lucy, his friend he loved, and thought to himself, it's all thanks to Knight Carolyn, who carefully prepared the materials for those in the tower to secretly go to the bookstore. Before going to worship the bookstore owner, the teacher also found out a lot of important information. Remembering how Claude was shouted at by Joseph at that time, Claude thought, thanks to that this time I won't become a victim but a witness. Claude at that time thinking in panic. When I heard the news that the Central District Supreme Police Department decided to conduct a large-scale inspection, my heart was pounding. I rushed over but didn't expect that I would still be one step late. Claude looked at that. The rose was withered, but there was an eye looking out from inside the rose, thinking, looking at this appearance. It seems that the culprit that led to those 3 idiots being eaten up was that wretched rose's real name. Thing called is a seed of ambition. Except for scholars who research this aspect, very few people currently know clearly about the species of this thing. According to records, this is a super rare breed domesticated in the kingdom, ancient spirit country, but it does not have a fixed shape as the grower wishes. It can form in many different plant forms because its intellectual ability is equivalent to that of a dog, so often it is taken as a pet and raised. But in essence it is an extremely aggressive creature that takes desire as food. This type of creature has a ferocious and greedy nature and has a strong appetite. Its strength will gradually increase based on the amount of desire it has devoured. The upper and lower limits of that strength are closely related to the bloodline and the cultivation of the seed of ambition. Claude looks at the rose tree had withered before the running thoughts of, there is no doubt that this seed of ambition in the bookstore must have been nurtured to an extremely high level. Its racial value and individual value must be said to be extremely excellent. At first glance it seems like a lot of effort has been accumulated. As expected of a bookstore owner, even the training aspect of this special species is so brilliant. Claude looked staring at the flower made the flower a bit shy. And Claude wondered, just why does it look like it's about to starve to death? To maintain its aggressiveness, must it starve, or is it an interesting peculiarity of this special species? Claude's eyes flashed, oh, I can't understand. In short, even though I don't know at what point did these policemen offend the bookstore owner. But fortunately the bookstore owner seemed to only consider them as toys for entertainment. Claude looked at Lin Ji's face flashing with light red, stared at the rose and thought to herself, it's just the seed of ambition that only devours their ambition and doesn't cause any damage. We must remain vigilant. Lin Ji was sitting across from her with her hand on her chin and looked at Claude. And Claude was thinking endlessly in his heart, evaluating the bookstore owner. Although friendly, God-level characters can no longer use human thoughts and morality to make guesses. His good-natured joking like now seems like he defines his own behavior. Simply wanting to scare them a little. This ability can have an indelible effect on ordinary people. Claude looked at Lin Ji thinking of 100 stories, faced with such an existence. What we can do is very limited. But as Knights of the Secret Tower, this is our responsibility, even if we have limited energy. We can't help but do it even with just a little guidance and advice. Claude said with one hand in his pocket and one hand on his chest. If they have any place to, I apologize on their behalf. Lin Ji smiled and raised his hand and said, it's no big deal. They were just fulfilling their duties. Lin Ji's face broke into a smile and said in a very calm voice. However, because my assistant's ID card is on the way, they asked me a few questions. Claude replied in a loud voice. I understand. Quote. Claude glanced at the moon next to him and thought. There's another new piece of information. Since when did such an assistant appear in the bookstore? Claude reviews moon from top to bottom. It seems like this girl is not very old. Moreover, she is so loved by the bookstore owner that when I asked the bookstore owner, she made it clear that her ID card was still on the way to deliver. Even hinted to me not to ask any more questions. Claude looked at Lin Ji like a person in the dark. The truth is right in front of your eyes. The bookstore owner must be rude because dissatisfied with the other three people. Using words and actions to warn me that being respectful is not as good as obeying orders. I don't want to step in the footsteps of these three people. And Lin Ji on this side is blooming. The smile was completely without dissatisfaction. Lin Ji praised in her heart, Joseph's disciple is really great. He is a new potential customer. It would be a shame if I don't build a good relationship with you. That. Lin Ji's eyes narrowed as he stared at Claude, but it turns out that Joseph's disciple is a level 1 inspector of the central police station. This on the contrary surprised me. The key point is, at this age, he's in such a high position. The future is definitely limitless. Needless to say, money is not a problem. Lin Ji looked at Claude, her eyes flashing as if she were looking at him, seeing gold coins falling from the sky. I must hold such a young and capable guest in the palm of my hand. Lin Ji's look made Claude feel like he had turned into a sheep. Always preparing, stripped of her fur, Lin Ji raised her voice and asked, are you Claude? You look tired. Don't be polite. Sit down and talk a little more. Claude spoke up to refuse. Lin Ji poured tea, huffed. Claude smiled, I'm a bit tired really. Let's sit down and rest for a while. Lin Ji put the cup of tea in front of him. Moon pushed the cup towards Claude, please have some tea. Claude replied with a smile, oh thank you. Lin Ji looked Moon's serving style. He thought, well, it's not bad to know when to serve tea well. I'm glad I was able to pick her up from this assistant. From now on I don't have to do everything directly. In the end, finally, there's the feeling of being a real boss. Lin Ji took a sip of tea, sat cross-legged on the chair and smiled. Telling you to come find me. There must be something else. Right, how has Joseph been lately? Since the day he gave me the sword he seems to be a lot lighter. Lin Ji thought to himself, he is Joseph's disciple. I came to send my regards on behalf of him. Saying so, confirms that he was sent by Joseph. Lin Ji imagined Joseph carrying Claude to introduce to Lin Ji, this is your Uncle Lin. Then Claude would bow his head and say, Lin Uncle. Lin Ji who would give the red envelope and say, good boy. Give you a lucky money envelope. Lin Ji imagined it with some difficulty thinking, I don't know why I feel like I'm being forced to do it, familiar with a child like that. After Claude raised his hand to hold the cup of tea, Claude's face was reflected in the cup of tea and he raised his voice and said, as you said, first of all, teacher, I send you my deepest thanks. Claude smiled and sat seriously. He put one hand on his thigh and said with a smile. Recently his mood is better than ever. There are even signs of personal breakthrough. Lin Ji looked at Claude's sitting posture and praised, so good. At this moment Lin Ji raised his voice and said, congratulations. Making a breakthrough at this age is really not easy. And Claude thought, the comment in my heart, I didn't expect the teacher to be able to recognize it's difficult to express the problem so quickly. Without any practical experience. It seems that letting go of the sword helped him understand the problem. Claude said, ask for help, Noken's safety level has been significantly increased. Claude thought to himself, maybe this kind of testing is not necessary. Claude's eyes stared at Lin Ji. Anyway, in this Nokia I have establishing a relationship with the spirit soldiers of ancient times. Only the Candela sword was handed over by the teacher to the bookstore owner. Even the bookstore owner didn't show up that day, so he could only go underground. Understand that he doesn't want others to know about this. The cup of tea was filled with steam. Lin Ji was sitting across the table drinking tea listening to Claude say. Lin Ji was extremely puzzled and asked himself in his heart, the level, what does the safety of Nokia have to do with me? Suddenly at this moment Lin Ji's eyes lit up. He understood and thought to himself, oh. So that's what it means. Lin Ji imagined Joseph fighting for Noken to eliminate evil and think, Joseph initially showed a hateful look, hates evil. But after being enlightened, his powers have improved significantly, confirming that he is once again carrying out his duty to control crime and talking about his body. If those punches, it's about the size of a punching bag and hitting someone in the face would be tight. Lin Ji put the teacup on the table and thought, it's probably not because of responsibility but more like excitement. Lin Ji said smiling to Claude, it's not like Joseph used all his strength. I'm just giving a little guidance. Claude on the opposite side was startled and thought, as expected. The person who acted that day was the bookstore owner. Claude put down a cup of tea down on the tea table. The cup slightly spilled out. Claude imagined Lin Ji sitting on the chair with a smile on her head. The strange magic formation in her hand is the Candela sword. Surely the bookstore owner used the ghost sword. The technique that the teacher handed over was used as a casting tool. And then summoned the heroic spirit points to complete the feat of killing the god. So the person assisting him was the teacher, not himself. Claude still remembers the image of King Candela. Obviously his great and practical action saved the Noken nation from crisis. But he acted indifferently without any arrogance. As if he didn't. I know what I've done. Claude sat across from him as if a fire was burning. Praising Lin Ji in his heart, the bookstore owner is really courteous and humble. Lin Ji sat opposite and looked at Claude with great wonder. At this moment, Claude put his hand to his mouth and coughed. In short, the teacher is very grateful for your help without seeking benefits. At this time, Claude took out a stack of papers from his pocket and said, last time you said you wanted to find the lost ancient language documents. The teacher personally edited them from the database. The thick stack of papers was placed on the table. Lin Ji looked at it with wide eyes. Claude pushed the other stack of papers towards Lin Ji said, but because the date is too long. The research progress is a bit slow. There isn't much reference material. Only a little. The original copy of the relic is already printed. I hope it can help you. Claude silently lamented in his heart and said, I did it myself, but in fact most of the materials were pushed by the teacher to me and Night Carolyn read and collect. Moreover, every time he made excuses for not being present. It was just the two of us facing a mess. And Lin Ji here heard that and had his own thoughts, documents regarding the ancient lost language of Azir. When Joseph gave me the ancestral sword last time, I was somewhat interested in the inscriptions on the sword, so I mentioned a few things to Joseph. So he offered to help me search for documents. I didn't expect the results to come out so quickly. With this little research, when I don't have customers, I have work to do. Lin Ji looked down at the thick documents before his eyes flashed. His mouth watered. Lin Ji, who thought Joseph was a research addict, thought to himself, Joseph is indeed very trustworthy. Lin Ji thought, so how come a living museum is so trustworthy? Raise a kid like Melissa. Family education is an important issue in human history. Lin Ji remembers little Melissa thinking, after all, at first parents are not born with the parental obligations. So they also have to learn slow down. Thank you in advance, let me see. It seems that what Claude said about slow research progress was not a lie but cleverness. Lin Ji said, holding a stack of papers in her hand, this long book is all original or handwritten. But later researchers could only find a few thin pages. Lin Ji silently looked at the file. Lin Ji's eyes flashed as she read the content inside. Thinking, it feels like many groups of researchers who have studied a number of different ingredients without any rules. Lin Ji's eyes flashed and he seemed to be lost in his own thoughts, when studying documents and books. Moreover, this document does not research the cause but only predictions and inferences. The actual translation only has a few versions. At a glance, we can see that these writers and translators are mostly not scholars. Professional fakers. But the people who excavated the ruins at that time. Thinking, Lin Ji ran frantically thinking, if the person who wrote these things is a next-generation scholar, then try to think of yourself as a human being a bit. There's no way I'm going to give up on this unfinished job unless an unexpected situation arises. If that doesn't happen, then I have no choice but to use this extremely bad expertise to figure it out. Lin Ji's eyes opened, then closed again. He thought, fortunately, there are enough originals. It's not too late to take the time to study them. Anyway, thank you for taking the trouble to come here. Lin Ji let out a sigh when Lin Ji raised her voice, making Claude on the other side tremble. Lin Ji asked, I wonder if you like to read books in your free time. Lin Ji's lips moved. If necessary, I can recommend a few books that are suitable for you. While Claude on the other side thought, here. Although I had already predicted that the bookstore owner would say these words. Claude's eyes were Lin Ji opposite like an evil figure with his arms outstretched, intending to do something. Claude's eyes widened slightly, sweat flowing down his face. Thinking, so Claude sat still and didn't dare to move because he could imagine there were things around him. Something terrible is staring. Claude tremblingly said, thank you for your good intentions. But I don't need it. As you can see, I still need to deal with these 3 rude guys. Maybe for the time being there will be no time to rest and have fun. Claude came out of the room and saw Joseph wearing pink pajamas with a rabbit print on them, taking care of the sick Melissa on the bed. Claude said, you're disturbing me, teacher. Joseph said, come here, Claude. Joseph's mechanical hand rests above the head of the bed. Melissa was still feverish and unconscious. Claude asked with concern, is Sister Melissa still recuperating in bed? Joseph said, is she under the influence of the documents at the store? Books lead to a state where she can't stop studying on her own. She just passed out due to lack of food and sleep, which is a lucky thing. Joseph's back sitting on the chair fell to the floor. He said, even though it's said that she got better places than having to pay the price of her life. But looking at her appearance now, I still instinctively feel scared. Joseph's eyes were a bit serious looking at Melissa lying on the bed. If I hadn't stopped her in time, I don't know what she would be like now. Joseph said angrily, so you listen carefully to what I say. Claude. Joseph's whole body lit up. He lit up the fire and said, if you don't want to become a fool in this house, you have to think carefully about whether you can handle the gift the bookstore owner gives you or not. Joseph looked at Claude and shouted, if the bookstore owner recommends a book to you, you should find a way to tactfully refuse it. If you have no choice but to accept it, you should carefully inquire to see the book. What use is this? Claude's face trembled in fear when he heard Joseph's words. Joseph said, you can open it in front of the bookstore owner or bring it back with me to study a bit. Joseph's warning voice still echoes in Claude's head, absolutely do not read it arbitrarily. Otherwise the consequences will be very unpredictable. At the moment Claude placed one hand on his thigh and pointed to the 3 unconscious policemen behind him and shyly said, Thank you for your good intentions, sir, but I still need to deal with these 3 rude guys. Maybe I won't have time to rest and have fun for the time being. Lin Ji heard that and couldn't force himself to smile and thought to himself, well, originally you came here to have business and it's understandable that you're busy with work. So there's no rush for now. Lin Ji said with a smile, it's a pity. We'll have to wait for another time. Lin Ji's red eyes flashed at Claude, but to be honest you are the most incompetent person I have ever seen. I think your central police department needs to improve their recruitment standards and quality of a policeman. Claude sat opposite, listening to Lin Ji's comment like that. It was like being struck by lightning and thinking, incompetent. Claude's eyes stared at Lin Ji thinking, speaking like that. You understand that books used to exist. Have you had contact with people from the police department in the past? Claude looked at Lin Ji, guessing countless things in his mind. The thoughts of this bookstore owner are truly unfathomable. Every word he says contains information worth pondering. It seems the teacher said that's right. You have to always keep a clear mind and sharp thinking when facing this person. You have to remember this information carefully so you can go back and prepare a report. Claude was afraid that he would forget to take out his notebook and pen to write it down. Then raise his voice and say, you're right. I have to make my opinion clear to this person in front of me. Claude put his hands on the table and said to Lin Ji, so if you need anything else please contact me anytime. This is my contact method. Claude took out his phone. Lin Ji smiled mysteriously in her heart and on the outside of her mouth. She accepted the contact method and said, that's great. It must be certain. Lin Ji thought in her heart. That's quite good. This golden master immediately gave me the contact method. This contact is for me. I'm not afraid of not being able to sell books in the future. And yet I can expand my relationship with the Supreme Police Department. Is this considered cheating? Quote. Lin Ji took the phone. I held it in my hand and on his phone there was the logo of the Chapman family. Claude paid close attention so he looked. Claude thought to himself, the logo of the Ash Chamber of Commerce. According to the information we know, this bookstore is still always under the control of the Ash Chamber of Commerce. At this time Lin Ji's phone displayed the name of little Kiri Chapman. Claude stared at Lin Ji's phone thinking, and it's just exactly 3 years. 3 years before was the time when the Dark Elf hybrid was brought back by the Chapman family. If you don't know about the existence of this bookstore, the Chapman witch will still be an unexplained thing. But for those who know it, just a little bit, just need to connect to know. The hand on Claude's thigh clenched. Claude can imagine Lin Ji, who holds the string controlling countless puppets, thinking, the original shop owner the book 3 years ago has already begun to have an influence. I wonder how many chess pieces he has controlled for himself in these 3 years. What a wonderful and scary arrangement. Claude sighed, silently thought, the good thing here is that not many people know about the existence of this bookstore. Including Wild. At least the people of the Truth Society don't know about this. This is a good thing. Luckily the secret tower blocked the news in time. Claude thought of the dishonest people at the Truth Association, otherwise the Truth Association might have to face a split situation like this. I hope those people will not choose to find their own way to die. The secret tower has also given a full warning. At this time Lin Ji said again, that's right. Startled Claude sat up and seriously shouted, yes, do you have anything else to tell me? Lin Ji looked at Claude's reaction and was a little confused. He thought to himself, why does his reaction look like he's facing an enemy? That year when I was a university lecturer, I faced students every day. The member was older than me. Their reaction wasn't that exaggerated. He and I weren't that different in age. Yet he treated me like I was an elder. Right, it's really a bit magical. But when I think about it, I and his teacher are friends. So his behavior can now be considered natural. Lin Ji smiled and his mouth moved. I still think, luckily, Teacher Lin, I'm very good at soothing shyness by making tea. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to talk to each other like this today. Lin Ji raised his voice but his words sounded like a devil in Claude's ears. I didn't expect him to be so nervous. Claude heard that and trembled non-stop. Lin Ji continued, look at your scared look. As if I could devour you alive. Lin Ji thought he was joking. He smiled and closed his eyes and said, see. It's not dangerous at all. Just relax, haha. While Claude on the other side was being joked about and was so scared that his color faded. Lin Ji he picked up his cup of tea and asked about something else. That reminds me, Is Melissa okay? She's still studying hard, isn't she? Not long ago, your teacher's precious daughter suddenly ran to me and asked for an antique hand. I guess maybe she had an argument with her father, so she gave her a few books to read. Now that I think about it, it's possible that those books don't seem suitable for her situation. Very well, even though the knowledge is a bit difficult. I hope her current condition is much better. Claude remembered the image of Melissa lying sick in bed and thought, she is indeed a little. She's been working hard and has been lying in bed like that for a week. Claude smiled and replied, thank you for taking care of her. These past few days I've been engrossed in studying. Although my body is a bit uncomfortable, but the actual progress is also very clear. Claude thought more in his heart, as for whether you will eat me alive or not, you can understand by looking at the guys lying on the ground. Well, who are the guys lying on the ground? She was unconscious. Lin Ji immediately said, that's good. Tell her to definitely pay attention to studying. But it must be combined with moderate rest. Don't need to exert too much effort and understand the basic knowledge first. Only then will we consider learning deeper knowledge. Only then can we be effective. Lin Ji smiled devilishly, thinking of Melissa immersed in studying. That's great. It seems this girl is also considered an encyclopedia. Later I will give her 2 more sets of exam practice questions for her new college entrance exam, slowly filling the void in her life with tests, until making her look like she can't be separated from studying. In this way I will improve my ability. I can sell a few more books. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. While Miss Moon behind Lin Ji saw his smile and sweat broke out. Lin Ji said to Claude, if in the future she still feels that her knowledge is lacking and wants to learn more, I always welcome her to come and buy books at any time. Claude breathed a sigh of relief and said, I pass on my words. Yours for her. Claude stood up from the table and thought to himself, that's great. If it was the bookstore owner who opened his mouth to say that, then Melissa would listen without being reluctant to study, which would also be an advantage for her. Claude stood up, his plump butt exposed. If you have nothing else to entrust, I'll leave first. Lin Ji waved goodbye. Okay. Welcome next time. Next to me, Moon also waved goodbye to Claude. Claude also smiled and closed his eyes to say goodbye to them. Then held the other 3 policemen in one hand and opened the door out. Claude pulled the 3 of them away and the door slammed shut. Lin Ji sat back in the chair, breathing heavily, thinking, if Joseph's disciple was a level 1 police officer and I also spoke directly about the issue of Moon's identity, okay. I believe that before Moon's ID card is sent by the Ash Chamber of Commerce, there's no need to worry about something similar like today happening again. Lin Ji put her hand on the wire folder, thinking, it's really nostalgic to say it. Since I passed through it until now I have had little contact with this thing. Lin Ji thought of the times when I went to explore ancient ruins to eat and drink frugal meals, looking for ancient relics or remote villages to organize documents. It's been a long time since I've felt so busy running around like this. In addition to doing some basic research about Azir's history and customs to integrate into local life when I first came here. It's been a long time since I touched on things related to my major. Right, Lin Ji looked at the book like his lover thought, after all, it's completely different from this world. So even if I wanted to research it, I wouldn't be able to research anything. Fortunately, Claude brought it to me, a good item. The benefits of having a wide relationship are right here. Lin Ji smiled and thought, it's good that I can be a good boss to my customers. Throw small bait, catch big fish. Do this, then the future will prosper. Sustainable development. Isn't this a cycle of taking advantage of each customer's resources for mutual development? It's not surprising that we, who always think of the practical benefits of our customers, truly have infinite merit. Lin Ji smiled on the bookshelf. There was also a dark shadow smiling with Lin Ji. And Moon on this side raised her cat hand to the shore of the file and asked, what is this? Lin Ji pushed Moon's forehead and said, don't touch it. These are documents related to a lost ancient language of Azir, which is also the inscription on the sword placed in my bedroom. Lin Ji pushing Moon's forehead away so she couldn't touch it. Lin Ji thought to herself, this child's curiosity is so high. It's like a kitten wanting to pounce while its owner is working. Curiosity to learn is good. But the problem is that even if you let her see these materials directly, she won't be able to understand it. Lin Ji said, okay, this is not something you can, looks like you haven't reached this level yet. Ji pointed at Moon with a serious face and said, "Look carefully so you don't get dizzy and faint on the spot like those 3 guys just now." Moon held her forehead and whispered. Thought, "Oh, it's like the brain is being regenerated. It hurts so much. But that text looks like it was engraved on a sword." Moon's wise brain immediately remembered something and she dropped with a whoosh into his own memory. Moon stood in an endless space. The texts and words engraved on the sword seemed to be trying to connect with each other in his consciousness. Countless missing information flashed past. I just blinked. Moon bewildered. My eyes seemed to have a flash of light and thought to myself, I seem to be able to feel that in the darkness there are thousands of unknown texts. Meaning I have been living in them for more than 100,000 years. That was one of the ghosts that destroyed civilization. Moon's eyes flashed white light in front of her as appearing in the snow in the distance was Blood and Candela's kneeling figure. In the sky at this moment it was like there was a dark shadow shaped like a demonic woman with 2 blue eyes and a white light in the center staring at the 2 of them. The dark shadow over there asked, "Why do I feel like there's a sympathetic look in this girl's eyes when looking at the remains of this era?" "No, it's still too early. This isn't something you can see right now." Moon was startled as if she had come out of a fantasy. Lin Ji asked, "What's wrong with you, Moon?" Moon stood there, her whole body trembling, not answering. She thought to herself, what the boss said isn't wrong. Even if it's just a little bit. Inspiration. Moon reached out to pick up the cup of tea on the table and thought. It also makes me feel scared. Just a glance will create a terrible illusion. If I stare for a long time, I won't know what's going on. What terrible things will happen next? In front of Lin Ji Moon's bewildered eyes. She quickly picked up the teacup and ran away, shouting, "I'm going to wash the teacup." Lin Ji looked bewildered at the girl's unchanging running figure and asked, "Is it really that scary?" Lin Ji stood up and said, "Children are indeed children, no matter how talented they are. They are afraid of learning." Lin Ji scratched her head and walked away, saying, "If one day she says she wants to be on her own, if she takes the initiative in studying, that's when she will truly grow up. At that time, she will no longer be in charge of cleaning the bookstore but will study with me." Lin Ji closed her shop. Outside in the neighbor's window, a pair of eyes and a flashing finger were looking at Claude's walking figure. Colin saw Claude dragging 3 policemen and thought to himself, look at the way this young man dresses an aura. This is not someone of Central District Police Department. Colin saw Ryan lying on the ground foaming at the mouth and trembling and said, "Oh my God, how can someone from the police department be like this? Why do you have such an attitude? Even my own person was injured and didn't ask anything." Colin thought to himself, even that young man. He looked at Claude's face and thought. The expression on that guy's face when he left the bookstore was actually a respectful attitude. Colin in the room quickly shouted loudly, "Help, that young man must have been controlled by that evil spirit." Holy water was carved into the door frame. Colin sat on the ground holding a cross praying, "Moonlight, please bless me, hear my request, pray for my peace." Colin's mouth was salivating. "Dad, Vincent, where are you? Come here and save me. And right now." On the other side of the 7th Division of N and Asia Parish, someone called Vincent. A pair of blue pupils and blonde hair looked over. A young man with a mole, holding a baby in one hand and with one hand touching the little girl's head. Vincent said in his voice, "Yes, I listen. Father, this person is Vincent, the priest of the Dome Church." The cool blue sky, the tree canopy swaying with the wind, the birds singing on the branches and leaves, and the fountain pen writing. On the paper there was a knock on the door. Claude raised his voice and said, "Come in." Lucy pushed the door in and said with a bright smile, "I'm sorry. Are you free now, Knight Claude?" Claude saw Lucy. His face turned red and called out, "Carolyn Knight. Seeing you is really too big. I mean, I'm free right now." Lucy walked in holding the file and said, "This outfit is mine. I will personally performing duties as a level 1 police officer of the Central District Police Department." Claude quickly explained, "Yes, based on the status of citizens in this world, gathering information for the suspect tower secret formula would be much more convenient." Lucy's figure looked from bottom to top with an extremely plump butt. Claude replied, "Oh, what's wrong? Why did you come to see me?" Lucy's face was a bit red, her lips moved in silence. Then in front of Claude's slightly bewildered face, she handed him a piece of paper. "This is for you." Lucy shyly turned her face away and said, "Aren't you the one you were entrusted by the teacher to visit you and bring the materials that the bookstore owner wants. Here, these are the review materials I compiled after returning from the bookstore. Maybe they will be of help to you. Lucy slightly blushing as he looked at Claude. He explained, with these things, we can at least prevent accidentally offending the bookstore owner or being accidentally injured by items in the bookstore. Claude heard that and his eyes lit up. Taking the file, she said to Lucy, that's great. These documents are exactly what I need. You're really someone who knows how to think ahead. Thank you very much, Lucy replied shyly, wearing red. The words, it's good to help. Lucy's face turned red, one of her eyes closed. The other eye opened, the chair lit up with white light. She silently looked at Claude for a review time. Only saw Claude's heart extremely happy to meet Lucy. Claude's face was still red. Lucy closed her eyes and smiled. While Claude in his heart was thinking, this is really so helpful. I really don't understand that Cavalier Carolyn is the top appraisal expert of Mi. It seems like there might be staff from Mi Thap to the new bookstore who specially prepared specific related materials like this. Lucy's chest was plump. Claude thought, it's really like before and after. Both cautious and trustworthy. Two birds on a tree branch leaning against each other. Pink balloons flying everywhere. Claude held the file and said to Lucy, but the security tower has already set it to Area 6. So there probably aren't any people from Tari going to the bookstore anymore. Right? Lucy pointed at the file and said, no, please look at this. The secret is not restricted to this area. This is to not disturb the bookstore owner and not make him feel dissatisfied. Lucy covered her face. Her eyes fell out and she said, if you go against your wishes, you will definitely encounter terrible things. The feeling of having your eye gouged out by a tentacle and then inserted into a new one is a feeling that will last my whole life. I want to experience that feeling again. Claude heard this and asked with concern, it's terrible. Are you still in pain now? Lucy turned her head and smiled and said, sometimes it hurts a bit. But it's not a big problem. Fortunately, as long as you don't risk your life to investigate the situation too deeply. It won't make the bookstore owner interested. Based on the analysis, my behavior and your fees can be said to be not bad. Lucy warned Claude first. In short, when facing you, we must follow your preferences in playing the role of bookstore owner. And more importantly, we must always keep respect in our hearts. Remember who you are dealing with. An existence far beyond human understanding. In my opinion, the bookstore owner is absolutely omniscient and omnipotent. And now Lin Ji the omniscient and omnipotent. Now he has to face the moon and the dead rose. Claude held the file and thought to himself, it's really a difficult job. Knight Carolyn has specially prepared such detailed information. I have to find a chance to express my gratitude later, before visiting the bookstore owner with this new research material on ancient literature. At this moment Claude's eyes flashed, wait. Lucy waved goodbye to Claude, so then these materials have been handed over to I'm done. Take your time watching. I'll go back to work first. Before waiting for Lucy's shadow to go away, Claude raised his voice to call Carolyn Knight. Lucy's turned away face turned red. Claude's voice rose in behind. This assessment material is not for the convenience of others but is specially prepared for me. Right? Lucy heard that. Her face was even redder than before. She remained silent. Her whole body trembled as she heard Claude behind her say, there were some things I neglected just now. These tasks are always done by the intelligence department, is not the responsibility of the logistics department. Claude walked around and Lucy looked at the file and said, furthermore, in this assessment document, in addition to the overall assessment report that you came to check last time, Claude said, it seems like there is a lot of information prepared, especially for me. When looking at my situation, I can see that you put a lot of thought into me. Lucy put her hands on her chest and said with a trembling voice, I don't have one. At this moment, Claude reached out and grabbed Lucy's red arm, making Lucy startled. Her heart was pounding loudly. In her head, she had imagined countless scenarios, such as having a fun dinner with Claude at a restaurant, then walking up the aisle with Claude. Her heart was pounding and pounding accordingly. Then she and Claude would do things that children couldn't understand. Then their lips would be a few centimeters apart. Lucy's heart was pounding and there was no sign of stopping. Lucy quickly covered her mouth but could not separate the sound of her beating heart. Claude raised his voice and asked Lucy, Carolyn Knight, please tell me the truth. Right? Lucy turned her head shyly and said, that's me. Who would have thought that Claude would hold Lucy's shoulder and ask honestly, did the teacher push all his work to you? Lucy was bewildered and bewildered, slightly angry. Claude tremblingly said, I see. He thought to himself, looking at her hesitant face. She probably doesn't. I wanted to do these part-time jobs. But I was so embarrassed that I refused. Claude scratched his head and thought. TSK Tusk. Since that old man was no longer a glorious great knight. He has become more and more cunning. Not only despite all my work. It's now getting even worse. Starting to harm other parts. Claude said shyly, I'm sorry about that. I'll tell the teacher later. Hey, try not to bother you. Claude sighed in his heart and thought to himself. Wow, what a headache. At first, I thought it was great that this was material that Caroline specially prepared for me. But how could she have no reason to worry so much? So just because a person like me has time now is good. Just rely on the magic hand of the teacher. Don't say you care. It's good not to be hated by her. And Lucy on this side as she stood there in bewilderment. Her eyes flashed white light again, then she immediately disappeared. Claude asked with concern, Hey, what's wrong with you? Are you unwell? Lucy quickly blushed and said, No. Me. At this moment the door of the room was pushed open and Joseph shouted, Is Carolyn in the room? How prepared are the documents about my writing? The two people in the room were blushing at this moment, startled. Joseph, like someone interrupting, Ayo, one sound. Joseph looked at the other two people dressed like statues and asked, Did I come at a bad time? Claude blushed and quickly explained, No number. Teacher, you came very timely. Basically the documents you want I have already arranged. Please take a look. Lucy's face next to her was red. After Joseph finished looking at the file, he praised, Not bad. Not disappointing. After finishing these documents, you can go visit Boss Lin. Surely Boss Lin will be very happy. Claude said, You are too complimented. It's all thanks to the help of the knight Carolyn. That's right, teacher, I have something to tell you. The thing is. At this moment Joseph spoke up and asked again, Isn't this what Carolyn specially made for you the other day? Lucy, who was behind her, heard that. Her face turned red, and she was startled when she heard Joseph speak. She quickly reached out and pulled Joseph's arm, shaking her head vigorously at Joseph. Joseph was silent and didn't say anything. At this time Claude criticized Joseph. He closed his eyes and said, By the way, teacher, you pushed the job of collecting the bookstore's documents to Knight Carolyn. Right. Joseph was standing there too. The person emitted a black aura, and Lucy was next to her, clasping her hands together to beg Joseph, and Claude was sure of his thoughts. He said, as expected. He opened his eyes and said, If there are jobs in the future, likewise, I will help. Please don't bother the staff of other departments anymore. Knight Carolyn's eyes are still hurting recently, so she is not suitable for the job of organizing documents. At this time Claude's voice rang again, announcing the content of the message as follows. All police, please conduct a large-scale inspection on 23rd Street. Before the end of Monday afternoon tea today. Sign the Central Police Station Supreme. Claude read this message and no longer cared about anything. His face looked like he had aged several years and his whole body was bewildered. Claude quickly shouted, Sorry teacher, I'll go first. Joseph saw that in a hurry, asked, What's wrong, Claude? Claude quickly pushed open the door and walked away. The Supreme Central Police Station will check 23rd Street, which will most likely disturb the bookstore owner's purity. But I know that the purity of those noble people's virtues is more than enough to succeed, and more than to fail. Hoping to still catch up. Teacher, I'm going first. I'll hand over these documents to the bookstore owner later. The door closed. Claude had left just so that Joseph and Lucy looked at each other silently and did not speak. Lucy blushed and said to Joseph, I will take back this review document first to help him more when there is new news. Lucy blushed and did not speak. Joseph also, she covered her face and patted Lucy's shoulder saying, It's been hard for you. What a pity, this kid is a piece of wood. Lucy also covered her face and remained silent. She looked for the file on the table and said, Sir, I'll go home first. I brought this appraisal document back first so I could have new intelligence and I added it for him. Lucy looked confused with sad eyes. But at this moment she saw something. For a moment, only saw among the documents. A pink letter with a bottle of some sort was placed on the table. Lucy asked, What is this? When Lucy saw the content above, she was startled. The content above the letter was, To Carolyn. This is the panacea I bought from Banyan Mall. It works very well. Hope it will ease the pain in your eyes. Also treat yourself. You treat it's very important to me. But this sentence has been crossed out. I'm always willing to help you. Next time if you have the chance. Please come with me. Lucy's heart pounded again. Her eyes turned red. She smiled and said, really? Lucy smiled without seeing the pain in her eyes and said, wooden horseman. After she put down the pen on the table she turned around and smiled at Joseph and said a lot, then I'll go first. Great night, Joseph. I wish you a good job. There will be similar jobs in the future. Try your best. Also, please don't embarrass Claude too much. He worked very hard. Joseph wondered. Joseph looked at Lucy happily leaving. His head full of questions thinking, what's wrong? Joseph scratched his head and stood still. Alone, saying, I really don't understand what kids are thinking these days. Is love so complicated? Little Claude isn't very smart either. If only he was half as smart as me when I was young. Small, I wonder if that wooden head of his will learn anything interesting. Outside the two birds in love there was a grey bird glaring at the two birds. Joseph sighed and said, phew, I don't think anymore. Let's go have a cup of tea. And the letter on Claude's desk was sent back with a thank you note from Lucy. Thank you for your interest. I will accept this gift. I will prepare a return gift. Please wait for it. While on the other side, a boy waved and called, ah, it's the elder priest. Just saw in the distance the sunlight shining on an old man with long white hair and white beard coming. The baby sitting on Vincent's shoulder waving and saying, good afternoon. Have you eaten anything? And the baby, the blue-haired boy standing below said, look. Father Vincent helped us pick a lot of fruit. The old man walked towards them and said, okay. Kids, don't pester Father Vincent too much. Your Father Vincent has just been taught by the new apostle and baptized. He just dropped by to see. So he doesn't have much time to play with you. The old man raised his hand towards two children. Hurry up and give these fruits to Susan. Tonight's apple pie will be very sweet. The two children shouted together, so great. This old man is senior father of the Dome Church of Mercy. Terence. Terence clasped his hands behind his back and looked at Vincent and said, long time no see. Vincent, it seems like these kids really like you. The other day there was a kid who told his father, he just needed looking into your eyes. I feel like I'm in a more comfortable mood. Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. Vincent smiled shyly and said, I remember saying that to Dad when I was a kid. Young man, I'm really happy that you can remember this. Now it's only you and two other priests here. On a normal day it must be hard to take care of so many children. Terence stood with his hands behind his back looking at the church in front of him and said, what's so hard? This is what I should do as a moon follower. The church has adopted gifted orphans and nurtured them. Nurture them into the best priests and nuns. Looking at the children playing, Terence raised his voice and said, after all, children who have no natural talent or have been eliminated must have a place to go. Vincent glanced at the terrace and said, Dad, I remember the first time we met. You were only a little older than these kids. Vincent replied nostalgically, that's right. The two people's backs fell down. Vincent looked at the scene in front of him, as if he was saying nostalgically, it was here that my father baptized me and joined the Dome Church. Then became an official priest. Some time later, I joined him in helping the poor. In this compassionate church, Terence looked up at the sky, smiled and said, I am the priest who has followed you the longest. In the end most people couldn't stand the poor life here so they chose to move here. Other parishes. Vincent held the terrace and walked to one side of the chair and said, if you hadn't forced me to leave that year, I would still choose to follow you now. Terence replied, isn't this the same? Stupid child, hey. Terence sat down on the chair, put his hands on his thighs and closed his eyes, saying, you know, right now you are the most famous and most loved priest in this sect. You have the ability to leave here to bless more people. If you stay here, it will only delay your future. Vincent also sat down on the chair, reached into his pocket, took out something, and said, I'm just flattering you, son, just an ordinary priest, not as good as you think. I can only solve some of the minor incidents caused by low-level evil spirits and dream beasts. Vincent took out his phone and said, getting this reputation now is actually based on a number of things. Vincent above smiled with narrowed eyes and raised the phone and said, if someone asks for help, it's evil, Lynn. I will tell him to prepare holy water. In fact it has the effect of exorcism. But the main effect is to improve sleep. In general, after using it about 2 to 3 times, Those who ask for help will feel evil. Spirit disappeared. From then on you appreciated my ability to exorcise evil spirits. Of course you also changed the method of exorcism. That formula is the formula that neighbor Colin received. Vincent explained, holy water. After being concluded from tests over a long period of time and used by the people, has been fully considered at the cost that the people can accept. But it is clear that the people do not know about this. They just wonder if this cheap holy water is really effective. This person is not cheating me. Therefore, I added some precious ingredients like pearls and gold foil to the holy water recipe. Vincent remembers that he explained a lot to those people and now he is telling his father, if the other person has a little difficulty with money. Leaving out these two ingredients is still effective. Although the effectiveness is slightly reduced. It's not a problem. If you don't agree, just tell me, I'll give you holy water. Who said I'm the one who exorcises the people? Quote. At that time Vincent raised his arms high and said to the people. Now he told his father, activities like this I will receive expectations and tears of emotion from my fellow countrymen. Industry. Vincent concluded. So when people encounter evil spirits they can contact me first. It can be said that these small changes not only significantly improve productivity but also bring many achievements. Vincent looked at his phone and said, but this also causes me some trouble. Vincent said sadly, for example, some colleagues say small things to me or sometimes I receive help that is beyond my ability. If I really encounter this situation again, I will only ask for help. Terrace said, this is just normal. Vincent. Terrace said to Vincent, everything always has a good side and a bad side just like the moon alternating between light and darkness. That is enlightenment in the dome. Terrace's back shadow how resolute. He said, I probably don't need to teach this kind of normal doctrine to you again. It seems like you've wanted to confide what you just said for a long time. But you still haven't found someone to confide in. Right, I want someone to acknowledge my actions and words. Terrace's eyes wrinkled and looked forward. Terrace stood up and said, my son. Have you lost your peace of mind? ? Quote. Vincent's lips pursed tightly and remained silent. Then Vincent spoke, it's true that nothing can be hidden from you, Dad. To be honest, I don't know what's going on with me lately. I'm finding it very difficult to control my behavior and emotions and often feel insecure inside. I even doubt whether I am a qualified moon follower or not. Terrace placed his hand on Vincent's head. Vincent's eyes flashed slightly. Terrace narrowed his eyes and said to Vincent, we are servants of the moon in this life. Worship the moon, serve the moon, love the moon and fear the moon. Good child, don't doubt the teachings of the moon. The moon will bring you peace and serenity. All the good deeds we have done throughout our lives stem from the faith within us. Under the canopy, the Terrace image is put his hand on Vincent's head clearly visible with his voice. Perhaps the most important thing now is to rest well and sincerely pray to the moon. If this place makes you safe you can come here anytime whenever you want. As long as you remain a follower of the moon, the door of the Church of Mercy will always be open to welcome you. Vincent closed his eyes tightly, one hand holding the necklace around his neck and the other hand touching it. Said in his head, I'm really ashamed. I'm a believer but my mind is not steadfast enough. Making Dad laugh. Vincent seemed to regain his confidence. He opened his eyes and smiled, feeling I'm much more relieved. Indeed, the choice to come back here was the right one. Dad was right. After completing the mission, I will take time to rest to adjust my state. Vincent said, standing in front of the terrace as a priest. I will try my best to fulfill my responsibilities. Vincent grabbed the pendant of the necklace as promised and said, I will take your words to heart. Spreading the gospel moon's sound and wash away the sins and demons of the world with goodwill. One day you will make me proud of you. Terrace's eyes stared at Vincent. As Terrace was about to speak, son, this is. But at this moment a man called out, Father Terrace. Are you there? My kid accidentally fell from the stable and broke his leg. Dad, please come and save him. Terrace heard this and walked past Vincent and said, don't worry, Dad will bring a box of medicine to cure that kid. The boy won't have any problem. And Vincent was silent, holding the necklace tightly, looking at the back of the terrace and said, Daddy, do you need any help? My divine magic can. Terence, still holding out for now, especially said, it's fine. Although my level of holy magic is ranked at the bottom among the abnormal levels. My medical skills are still superb. You don't need to waste your time helping me. Terrace will glance at Vincent and say, go. My child. There are still more lost sheep that you need to save. It is your duty as a priest and to help others. Vincent closed his eyes and bowed goodbye to Terrace, saying, under the watchful eye of Moon, the appreciation of others is the best reward. I always keep your words in my heart. Vincent waved goodbye to Terrace. Well, it's time for me to go help this man. I'll be traveling for a few days. I'll come to visit you again later. Vincent left. Terrace turned back and waved goodbye to him. Go in peace, Vincent. With wrinkled old eyes, the corner of the terrace, looking at the silent silhouette of Vincent. The image of Vincent in his eyes from a baby is now so tall. Terrace closes his eyes. He also has a necklace with a star-shaped pendant. He clasped his hands and prayed, O merciful Moon, protect the most loyal believers and bring peace. May the world put their trust in the moon. All the sins in their hearts make the world a good place. More beautiful. Hope kindness will be rewarded. 3 days later, at a street light pole, a crow dropped its feathers. A step was walking and a voice said, finally here. Vincent stood on street number 23 and said, this is street number 23. Vincent's eyes were full of dark circles. He said, sunset is the moment of the devil. Vincent raised his eyes to look at the sunset in the sky. It feels so quiet. There are no cars or passersby. Saturday at the Dome Church of Charity is so different. The crow's feather fell to the ground. Vincent cast a shadow under the setting sun, a vague feeling of insecurity. Vincent thought back on the events that happened. Recently there have been a lot of things going on in this area. I've heard a little about the two. This famous incident was so damaging that those great people must have had a hard time concealing the truth. After all, among all the extraordinary beings, only the lower ranks of the church only allowed to show off his abilities to the people. Vincent closed his eyes filled with dark circles and fell into thought. This is also the reason why the church needs faith, but Noken is overpowered by dreamscapes. Harassment is unavoidable. Some big incidents need to be hidden so that people don't panic, while small incidents don't need to be. That's why a small character like me has the ability to gain fame far beyond. That's my ability. Looking at the messy dirt road of Noken being cleaned, Vincent thought, but the true people of the high class, the great people who saved Nokia, are anonymous people. Vincent breathed and said, don't think too much anymore. Anyway, we have to complete this mission first. Vincent's eyes flashed. He gave a strange smile and spoke in a very strange voice. Hope you what I've been experiencing these past few days is not caused by evil spirits but due to lack of sleep. Otherwise I will add some new ingredients to the holy water of the person who asked for help. Vincent suddenly said, realizing he was thinking wrong. He covered his eyes and said, sigh. I shouldn't have such thoughts. Vincent clutched the necklace around his neck thinking, it started again. I thought it would calm down after the conversation I talked to my dad. I don't know why I'm constantly in such a frustrated mood lately. I get angry more easily than usual, and with just a few thoughts I've lost the compassion and tolerance that a priest needs. Vincent's shadow fell on the alley. Even the apostles' baptism and the father's teachings can't calm my mood. Maybe it's because I'm really tired. On the phone displayed the sent message. Vincent sighed and thought, I have to hurry. Let's quickly resolve this matter and then quickly take a break to adjust our mood. This world is so beautiful, we can't help people asking for help with this angry mood. Vincent knocks on Colin's door. Here it is. The residence of Mr. Carl Colin, who owns a sound store. Not sure why he was stressed that I had to enter from the back door. The door opened a little. Then Colin's eyes looked out from inside. When Colin saw Vincent, the door was opened wide. Colin screamed loudly, startling Vincent standing outside the door. Colin had tears, snot, and saliva all over his face and quickly ran to hug Vincent. Oh, praise the moon. Father Vincent, you're finally here, Colin said with tears in his eyes and nose. Hurry and save me. At this moment a hand covered Colin's face. Colin cried loudly. Vincent held his necklace tightly and thought to himself, if it weren't for this moving lump of fat making human sounds, I would have almost released the spell. No, as a priest I can't do that. So to the person who asked for help, Vincent began his mentally restless career. He put one hand on his mouth and the other rubbed Colin's head and said, good boy. You don't want to alarm the evil spirit the house next door. Colin's eyes lit up. Tears and snot were still running and said, I will do as you say. Close my mouth. Close my mouth happily, because when you come now I will feel secure. Colin sat on the ground, pulled the towel that Vincent was wearing and wiped his nose. Colin looked at Vincent with sparkling eyes, thinking, my miserable days are finally over. When the priest comes is when the light of the sky appears. Colin looking at Vincent's thoughtful face. I thought, I can feel the kind and caring look in the priest's eyes. He must be thinking about how to deal with that evil spirit by now. As fast as possible. And Vincent now looked at his arm and thought to himself, I can't hit him. Vincent entered the house. There was a pitcher of water placed on the table. Vincent's hand was also placed on the table, glowing, and said, I can roughly grasp the situation. A few days before I arrived, he injured 3 policemen in the central police station and controlled their spirits. On the hand Vincent was sprayed with holy water, and the shawl from earlier was also sprayed with holy water. Vincent said, holy water doesn't work either. Does it even make him worse? If it's true what you say, then I will be more fully prepared to act tomorrow night. So tonight I'll just stay here temporarily. Colin happily replied, no problem. Just in time for my warehouse. I'm also empty even though it's a little dirty. If you can't stand it, I can clean it up a bit. Okay, Vincent also smiled when he heard that. Silently chanting, I can't bear it. Vincent went down the bridge thang. Colin stood above and said, if there is anything else you ask me to do, I will definitely cooperate. Vincent secretly thought, the person who does nothing is already the best cooperation for me. The door closed. Again, Colin was still saying, that's right. Look, I'll describe to you why that evil spirit is so scary. Vincent entered the storage room and said with a sigh of relief, it feels good. Being in the room alone is great. Vincent covered his forehead and said, you kids who don't understand are so annoying. Vincent took out the box of cigarettes and lit the cigarette with shaking hands, saying, luckily this will end soon. Stop. Smoke lingered in the room. Vincent smiled, looked up at the silent ceiling. That night the moon hung high in the warehouse. A piece of paper filled with words, a necklace and a bottle of holy water were placed next to. But Vincent's eyes were now black. He looked around and thought, everything is ready. I better go over there and take a look. If the bookstore owner is really an evil person, evil spirit, or being influenced by some supernatural creature, at least under normal circumstances he will still act like a normal person without any abnormalities. Vincent imagines the image dead people stabbed to death or people killed by countless skeletons. This type of situation is similar to cases I have dealt with in the past. Ghosts who died by suicide and left behind people will repeat the actions of their previous lives over and over again without knowing they are dead. There are also some evil spirits that will only affect the host in certain situations. Because their own strength is not strong enough, you can only set a trap like a spider, then deceive and kill everyone. Vincent's dark eyes narrowed. I didn't feel the breath of the evil spirit before. So it's highly likely that it was a dream, harassed by animals or supernatural creatures. Vincent remembered what Colin had said to himself, and according to Colin's words, there were no unusual situations before. Just last month he had asked the owner of the bookstore next door to turn on the power switch. This is when a strange situation arose. Recalling a bit of Colin's conversation, Colin repeatedly said, let me tell you what that thing really is. It's very scary. Then I'll do it. At that time Vincent also sat very seriously on the chair and listened. At that time, Colin held the cross in his hand and asked, that's right, why don't you use the silver fork to deal with the evil god? I said this is very useful. Vincent waved his hand and interrupted Colin, saying, this thing is useless. Colin still tried to argue, but my grandmother said, Vincent said, it's useless. Vincent now covered his forehead and pursed his lips, thinking, but I can't believe everything he said. It's really me having to communicate with the naked eye with people who don't know anything is really tiring. Vincent put the fountain pen on the notepad. In general, we can only build on the current hypothesis. Vincent stood with his hands on the table and thought. Perhaps during that period of time, it was also the gestation period for god-level dream beasts. So at this time the number of dream rifts in this place increased, leading to a small number of dream beasts. The lower levels also ran out. Vincent took out a black cloth and thought, maybe they used god-level ether waves as a cover to avoid the attention of the secret tower and the Truth Association. Vincent took one cloth. He tied the black cloth over his eyes and said, in short, first we have to determine what their real goal is. The front of the cloth had a moon and a star pictured by Vincent covering his eyes. Vincent whispered and read aloud, Eye of the moon, open. The moon and star shapes on the black cloth above Vincent's eyes emitted light. Then Vincent saw the room clearly. More. Vincent turned the doorknob. He looked at Colin in front of him, thinking, even though the priests at the church have to cover up at night to make sure they won't be able to see the moon, they do have the eye of the moon, unique gift given by the moon. In addition to covering the eyes and seeing things in a dark state, it also has the effect of being able to see the opponent's status. Colin's current status is extremely excited because Vincent can go kill evil spirits. The door opened. Vincent covered his eyes and looked at Colin, who was standing, and said, "Then customer Colin, we will go to eliminate evil spirits." Colin stood hiding behind the door, said, "Okay. Once you've eliminated the evil spirit, you can go home directly without coming back here. I'm afraid that when you return, you'll bring something unclean or unlucky. If you have the results, please report back to me. I'll call you." The door was accidentally closed. Vincent stood silently outside the door. 3 dots. Vincent was trembling all over. His mouth pursed tightly. He grabbed his collar and thought, okay, if there's a ghost, if it's true, getting rid of them would be good for the people around. Vincent walked under the moonlight. Vincent smiled. Let me expand my knowledge a bit. What kind of god are you? Evil spirit. At this time in the bookstore, Moon said, "Boss." Lin Ji held her chin and said, "No need to say. Moon, you have to believe in me." The rose tree in front was gradually wilting. The eye also fell from the rose. It could be seen that the rose was about to leave the earth. Lin Ji's face was slightly bewildered and her head was full of sweat and said, "This flower pot turned into what it is now. I fertilized it, for it really has no relationship at all." Moon is next to news. New girl 3 dots is silent. Lin Ji tries to defend herself. "Moon, this is definitely the law of nature. Plants wither and prosperity is determined by heaven and does not depend on human wishes." 3 dot Moon. Lin Ji tried to explain to save her image, just like the so-called melting into sadness, crushed into dust, only the fragrance remains intact. Do you understand this problem, Moon? Moon's whole body felt like she was struck by lightning. She still replied, "I understand." Moon thought to herself, the fragrance is still intact. What the boss means is to let the flower pot dry on its own and then use it to process it into water. Flowers. At this moment Lin Ji smiled. "You understand." The cup of tea was steaming hot. Moon asked, "So boss, when are you planning to completely nurse it to death?" Lin Ji just drank it into a piece of coffee and immediately spit it out. Lin Ji's head was covered in sweat and her whole body was covered in sweat. Always looking at Moon and thinking, this kid is getting more and more difficult to fool. Somewhat inflexible. Lin Ji coughed and looked at Moon and explained, "That's it. I think it can still be cured." The rose next to it wanted to log out of the earth. But what else could be saved? At this time the doorknob was held by someone and the bell on the door jingled. The wings. The door was opened by someone. Vincent covered his eyes and pushed the door in. Lin Ji quickly stood up to greet his customer. "Hello. I don't know if you want to buy books, borrow books or read books here." Quote dot. Lin Ji, who is always quick to turn on business mode. At this moment Lin Ji's eyes flashed him. "Huh?" A sound. He stared at Vincent, who was covering his eyes with a black cloth, thinking, a blind person and also a blind priest, this is really a rare guest. Lin Ji put his finger on his chin thoughtfully and thought, I should have been the one to be guided by this person. But now I have become the one to guide this person. I can't help but say when I see this person seem to see a flash of philosophical knowledge. And Vincent on this side was silent. 3 dots. At this time Moon spoke, "Guest, let me help you." At this time Lin Ji held out his hand, stopping him. He raised a finger to his mouth to signal her to be quiet. Lin Ji asked, "Guest, are you the priest of the Dome Church?" Vincent on this side was secretly startled when he heard that Vincent's footsteps slowed down. Thinking, I didn't expect that something unexpected would suddenly happen. In Vincent's eyes, he clearly saw the image and face of Lin Ji and the moon. Vincent thought to himself, this bookstore owner is much more alert than I imagined. Without any signs of recognition. But he can recognize himself as the priest of the Dome Church. Vincent's eyes behind the black cloth flashed blue light, thinking, however, this bookstore exudes a strange aura strangely. In Vincent's eyes he could clearly see the circling golden green aura. As soon as I stepped into this place I could feel the traces of remaining ether fluctuations. This shows there have been supernatural characters or creatures here. Vincent looked at the monster statue placed on the table. Currently the object with the strongest supernatural aura here is the demon stone statue of the Black Wizard. Just a glance is enough to feel the extremely cold anger of the spirit seal. Vincent thought as he walked closer to the statue, his hand still holding the necklace tightly. In hand, it seems that this demon stone is the cause of that evil spirit incident. Outside at this time there was a black shadow with red eyes staring. Vincent thought to himself, Colin's request for help. There is no basis, but the direction seems to be a bit wrong. There is no problem with the owner of this bookstore, but the problem lies in the layout of the bookstore. It must be the bookstore itself. In the eyes Vincent's silhouettes of Moon and Lin Ji were extremely clear that they were standing around the place where the purple aura was coming from. Vincent thought, if the problem isn't in the bookstore, then surely this place must be hiding something else Colin didn't know. And maybe the bookstore owner was also the victim in this story. But the current situation is a bit difficult to resolve. Vincent's thoughts were flying, I'm here, with the mindset of being fully equipped with weapons to be able to eliminate evil spirits. But the unexpected thing here is that the other person suddenly asked if he was a priest of the Dome Church. Even if he thought in this way. Anyway, this message from the bookstore owner seems to be a bit of a warning to me. Vincent didn't wait for an invitation but pulled out his chair himself. Thinking, if that's the case, then this poor person in front of me might have been bewitched. Vincent thought, I have to remain vigilant. Try talking to him first to see if he's normal or not. Vincent sat on the chair with a smile in his hand holding the necklace and replied Lin Ji, yes I working in this parish. Vincent's eyes behind the black cloth flashed blue light. He stared at Lin Ji again. Judging from the results observed by Nwet Chi's eyes, the other person is completely just an ordinary person. So first I'll try to convince him to leave this place and then I'll proceed. Eliminate the evil spirit on this evil stone statue. Lin Ji heard Vincent ask again, work? Lin Ji thought in his heart, this priest in front of him seems to be a relatively dedicated person. Moreover, in his words it seems like there's still some hidden meaning. Lin Ji's hand on the table clenched tightly. It's like there's something you want to say but you're afraid to say it directly. Lin Ji looked at Vincent sitting opposite and began to analyze Vincent's psychology in his heart. If he said he was on a business trip and that he came to his bookstore for some purpose, then it must be his job. If so, the job that priests usually do is what? Lin Ji remembers the daily work of a priest. Instructing the people, or advising and comforting them. Lin Ji ponders, managing and carrying out missionary activities in the area under the parish. Map. Preside over the mass and bless the wedding. Pray, confess and perform the death rite. Lin Ji sat opposite, his red eyes flashing, exorcism. A normal priest can't just run over this place is for missionary purposes and the rest is not possible. Lin Ji remembers what policeman Ryan once said, that the neighbors said he was an evil spirit. Lin Ji understood the problem behind Lin Ji's back. A pair of red eyes were staring. Lin Ji spoke in a very deep voice with a slightly strange smile. Lin Ji said, So you came here because of Colin, right? He took me for granted, that's why the evil spirit invited you to come and eliminate the evil spirit. I'm right, priest. Vincent sat opposite, bewildered.